a slight pun for programmers. The topic I'm going to share with you today is about jury nullification. Now, when people immigrate to America, what are the phrases people often ask about what it is to be, why are they coming to America? And oftentimes what people say is freedom, right? A lot of people say America is a free country. Would it surprise you? Oh, good Lord. Thank you. This is BIL. This is exactly what... We're seen as the land of the free. Would it surprise you if we have the highest prison population on the planet? You're not, but because you read, I mean, this is BIL. But indeed, we have a 2.5 million prisoners in the U.S. A little bit of feedback. We have, actually, and the rate has increased dramatically in the last 30 years, since 1970. We have it primarily because of the war on drugs. We have right now 1 in 31 Americans is either in prison, on parole, or on probation. Oh, close to the mic, sorry about that, all right. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice, right now we have basically a huge fraction of the population that are at some capacity under watch. Right now we are number 1, China is number 2, probably only because they execute so many people. On a per capita basis, we're behind Russia. 1 in 31 adults are under the custody. And if it's young black men, it is 1 in 9. Age 20 to 34, 1 in 9 young black men are either in prison, on probation, or on parole. Anyone hear the phrase DWB? Yeah. Driving while black. It's a grim and kind of a silly joke within the African American community of what it means that you will be pulled over for the crime of being black and driving a nice car. And this was really brought to my attention primarily from my friend Neil, who told me his experience when he turned 16 learning to drive, that when he was learning to drive, his father gave him a lecture that I never got when I was 16. He told him, this is what you do when you get pulled over, not if, when. This is how you don't get arrested, here's how to not get shot. And when I was 16, my driving lessons primarily was don't mess up the family car, don't mess with our insurance rates. Chinese parents, it's all about money. And the thought of getting arrested or pulled over never really crossed our minds. I mean, when we Asians get pulled over, we seriously screwed up. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the story of Peter Watts. He's a science fiction author who was crossing over from Canada to the US, and in the process of being asked to pull over and be searched, he did not comply fast enough. He did not get on the ground and put his hands on his head fast enough. Jury trial, one of the jurors actually asked the judge, is failure to comply a crime? And they were grudgingly voted to convict him. And as a result, that he's a convicted felon now, he can never return to the United States. He served a 12-month term in federal jail, and that's it. You're barred as a convicted felon to cross over into the United States for the crime. They never found anything in his vehicle for the crime of not getting on your knees fast enough. And this is what we have right now in the land of the free. We have the prison industrial complex, and actually, and in finance, one of the first jobs I worked in investment banking was actually, quite embarrassingly now, helping a company called Wackenhut issue a huge amount of money, issue a bond issue to build a gigantic prison. And so I personally feel some guilt about this. We have, because their bread is exactly buttered by the very organizations that feed them the prisoners, they give very aggressively to politicians in lobbying dollars to make sure that law and order, tough on crime politicians get elected over and over again. So what is jury nullification? How many of you are familiar with the term before I go on? Wow, this is excellent. The last time I gave this talk, not a lot of people are. For those who aren't familiar, jury nullification is the practice as a juror of saying that even if the person is guilty or proven of doing the thing that he's accused of, I don't think that act should be a crime at all. For a while there's slavery in America, there was a period of time when hiding and aiding a slave, a runaway slave, was a crime. Now, if you were a juror, you can say, well, this person indeed sheltered and helped these runaway slaves. I don't think he ought to be guilty anyway. And the thing is that right now, our war on drugs, most of our 2.5 million prisoners are nonviolent drug offenders. And so you have rights that prosecutors and judges don't want you to know about. You have the right as a juror to say, hey, I don't think that growing 25 plants in your backyard is a crime that should be punished by 10 years in prison. And the problem, of course, is that the average person in this crowd is someone somewhere along that part of the IQ curve. Most people here are not going to end up serving in juries. The stupidest person in this conference probably has like an IQ of 120. I should know this because that would be me. So, what do you do? I was looking for the worst photo of me, and somehow this was in my iPhoto calendar. Well, in any event. So the thing is that we need to find a way to communicate that to people actually going to serve in juries. Because here's the other thing. In the state of California, defense attorneys are forbidden to inform jurors of the punishment that awaits the accused if they're in fact found guilty. They can't use that as part of their defense. And so if someone is, you have jurors that say, I had no idea I was sending that young man away for like 15 years because he had, this whatever arbitrary threshold of marijuana or whatever. And what's being done right now? The problem is that the issue of jury nullification is largely a relatively obscure topic, and it's written in the largest advocate is right now the Fully Informed Jury Association, fija.org. And this is their website. It's written by and for law nerds who are on that part of the bell curve. And I don't know about you, but even educated, intelligent people who aren't lawyers don't like reading legalese. How does the average person with an average intelligence, an average education level even grasp all the stuff that's inside there? It's not, the tools aren't there to communicate what their powers are. They have good intentions, but they're written by and for law nerds. And we need to find a way to address the people that are actually going to be typical jurors. Here's the thing that I believe this is the way we can reach them. If you Google jury duty, guess what? The number one entry is how do you get out of jury duty, right? And the nice thing is pretty much nobody is buying any of the AdWords for the word jury duty. So the goal right now, and this thing I'm spearheading right now, is to start a foundation, a legal education foundation, targeted at the 100 IQ crowd, buy out that space, dominate that space, and direct people to an education site about these are your powers of jury. Because what does everyone do when they face a brand new topic? They go jury duty.
You don't have to buy it. Google will give it to you.
You can do, we'd like to do that as well, but for the time being, in the short term, that's what we want to do. So we don't want to speak like law nerds or directed at law nerds. People who went to law school, they know what it is. It's the average juror that we want to communicate to. So the idea is, how do you do it? The idea was to do it as a graphic novel, manga style. How many of you are familiar with chick tracts? Yes, you know about them. These are evangelical, for those who are unfamiliar, chick tracts are evangelical. It's written by this guy named Jack Chick, who writes these little homilies about 24 to 36 pages, a little story about, so-and-so who, turned his back on Jesus, and then, after he went through some awful experience, comes to God and accepts Jesus Christ as his personal savior, and boom. He has sold 100 million of these tracts to Christians who then leave them at, telephone booths and strip clubs or wherever Christians go when they're trying to evangelize. The idea is how we want to build instructional PDFs to explain a jury's power to the 100 IQ crowd. Create and explain that entire story using illustrations. Have PDFs you can print out and pass along to other jurors, informing them of their rights as jurors as well. Because the whole idea is to be able to communicate, bring that in as a very subversive way to communicate this knowledge to a crowd of 12 who ultimately decide the fates of young men and women who are accused of nonviolent crimes. Right now, in California, it costs $47,000 to incarcerate one person for a year, to feed, guard, and house them. And that's the explicit cost. The implicit cost, the one you don't see, is that every person you take out of circulation is also, that person's no longer paying rent, paying a mortgage, participating in the economy, and that effect cascades forward even after they leave. A lot of them are unemployable afterward and have diminished earning capacities. As a convicted felon, your employment options are far more restricted. And so all these things flow into the tremendous social costs that all of us are shouldering. I don't know how many of you have paid $47,000 in California state income taxes. I didn't. And so we're all collectively subsidizing probably about 3 or 4 prisoners in this room, maybe. So this is my invitation. Be part of the solution. We're trying to build this organization, and we also need your help. What we need right now are social media guru. We want to build, we've got the domain name juryangel.org. We want a social media guru, help us get the word out. Programmer, do the back-end programming. Community manager. We want to be able to attract stories of people who have nullified unjust verdicts and set people free. graphic artist, we have a couple of people already who are in the process of building a small PDF that we can hand out, print out, as well as have on the screen, and marketing advertising people who can help craft effective messages to that community. That's my time. Have any questions? I saw a couple hands raised, so... Yes. So the question was, for the cost of incarceration, it is indeed per year, $47,000 per year per person. Question, comment? Go. Oh, mic is on your way, so go ahead. Oh, wait for the mic. Otherwise, I'll have to repeat the question.
Great. So I think you're saying for people who are serving on juries,
yes,
don't convict people.
Let me clarify. For nonviolent drug offenses, that is not don't convict. I mean, the point is that $47,000, if it's locking up if it's a murderer, a rapist, probably belongs there. And also, I want to emphasize that jury nullification has been used for bad purposes as well. During segregation, there have been instances where people have lynched black men, and they say, well, that's not a crime, and so people have let bad men, murderers, free. So it's like any tool. It can be used for good or evil. Hopefully, we've advanced enough in society that even out-and-out racists, the few that are left, would still agree that killing black men is a crime. Even if they don't like them, it's like they can still agree it's a crime. And we've advanced enough where I think the goal now is to just inform people that you do have this right. If you feel like this is something that, as an informed jury, you can say this shouldn't be a crime. We shouldn't lock up people for possessing a certain arbitrary number of substances. Question. Sweep that way. Oh, okay.
Kai, two quick questions.
Go.
One is, does it just take one person on the jury? And the follow-up question would be, if just one person says, I don't think this should be a crime, can they retry?
Excellent question. With one person, what you'll do is you can hang the jury, because you need a unanimous vote to convict. And so with one person, you can just simply hamstring. And the nice thing with a lot of possession charges, nonviolent drug charges, is that once there's a hung jury, the prosecutor will typically decline to re-prosecute, although they do have the right to re-prosecute and try with a fresh set. The goal is really to frustrate prosecutors and force them to concentrate on real crimes against people. Go ahead.
In Beverly Hills, about a year ago, I was called for jury duty.
Yes.
And the judge very pointedly, and not in response to anybody's comment, informed us all that jury nullification was not okay in his courtroom, and he would punish any juror that he thought was acting that way.
So the question was that he mentioned that you served in a jury, and the judge said that he was explicitly saying that jury nullification is frowned upon, and not a single juror, I've been researching it, not a single juror has ever been punished for it, so that he was bluffing, number one. And two, you can vote not guilty and not give anyone your reason. Your reasons, deliberations, are completely private. You can choose to vote your conscience and keep that to yourself, and that's part of what we're trying to do.
So, not that I don't disagree with you about the drug criminals not being convicted, but how do you feel about the rule of law versus the rule of men? Because this is a complete abrogation of that.
So the notion is that right now, what people feel is that the correct way to do it is to get legislation to right the wrongs, as opposed to try to subvert and run the system. It's been my experience, and defense attorneys that I've spoken with, that the system itself is so fundamentally broken that it's just like seasteading. The only way to enact serious change is to end run the system. Right now, you have an unholy alliance of right-wing, largely Republican law and order types that just want to lock up brown people, and mostly Democrat-leaning prison guard unions that are in cahoots with each other to make sure that there are large mandatory minimum sentences, because it's a fantastic way to suck up taxpayer dollars and put it in their pockets.
What I mean is, how would you feel if someone else were jury nullifying over a law you agreed with?
If they vote their conscience, even if I don't like it, it is their right as a juror. Question. Yes, they were. It was actually from FIJA guy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your question. Go ahead. So it was FIJA guy, and what he was arrested for was interference and jury tampering, because he was deliberately trying to sway a particular case. That's something that is against the law. And if like an organized crime guy was on trial and he sent his goons to intimidate people who were going in, that is illegal, and it ought to be. But if you're informing the general public that says that you have a right to vote your conscience, you don't have to necessarily vote on the technical aspects of is this guy guilty? Beg pardon? Yes, that was what he's accused of, and that's why he got arrested. It's First Amendment rights. You can say whatever you want in front of a courthouse. Go ahead. Yeah. The suspicion is that they're accusing him of that. It doesn't mean he's necessarily guilty of it, but that's the accusation, that he's trying to tamper a particular case. You know, it's a pretext. I am almost out of time. 3, 2, 1. One last question, and we got to go.
But how do you feel about, how do you feel about these elaborate questionnaires that jurors get before a trial even starts? There's a lot of stacking of the deck in the jury that I felt was sort of unfair.
Indeed.
It's like I was up to be on a murder trial.
Yes.
And before I even got a chance, all the attorneys said, well, if this person is convicted, are you capable of putting them to the death penalty? And I kind of wanted to go, well, it's none of your business. My only qualification to be on this jury should be, am I a peer of this person who is on trial? That's what it's supposed to be about, not stacking the deck.
I agree. Right now, the problem is that jury consulting has basically made this a game where both parties will try to find ways to profile you in an attempt to weed out those that are going to be unfavorable to their own, what they are after. And the goal, and it's become this kind of perverted form, and that's why I feel like this is the only way to end run that entire system, is to basically answer the question in a way that you get yourself on the jury and then vote your conscience. That's, I think, the most effective strategy, because then ultimately, as juries deliver verdicts in a certain direction, they will ultimately have to readjust how they go after which criminals.
Listen, any 12 people who can't get out of jury duty aren't my peers.
And thank you. That's my time. Any questions? Feel free to reach. Thank you.